Welcome back. In today's episode, I sit with Sarah Rabibo, the co-founder and executive director of Maor, the first and only Jewish special needs day school in Los Angeles. Sarah brings a unique blend of strategic expertise and compassion to Jewish education. Her background in business litigation at prestigious firms like Skadden and Arps, Winston and Strawn honed her ability to innovate and find creative solutions to complex challenges. As a devoted mother of four, including a child with special needs, Sarah is passionate about creating a supportive and inclusive environment for children of all abilities within our Jewish community. To learn more about Maor and the work they do, please visit the link in the bio. And this episode is once again brought to you by Shani Wigs, a premier wig atelier specializing in creating custom and bespoke wigs. No two individuals are the same, and neither should your wigs be. Shani doesn't use factories or mass production. Instead, each one is lovingly imagined and designed by Shani herself and carefully assembled in their New York-based studio. Shani Wigs have helped countless women struggling with their hair loss, alopecia, or challenging medical diagnosis to feel themselves again. Designed for women with hair or without, Shani Wigs makes sure you fall in love with your hair again and enjoy the process. Welcome in today, Sarah. There's so many firsts with today. I don't even know where to begin. One, we have the no cell phone rule, which we're breaking for you. You're allowed to have your cell phone on and even near you. So a life unfiltered first. Two, you were the first guest that I really had to do some convincing to come in because you did not want to do this.
Okay.
Most people are chomping at the bit. And the third, this episode was the first one that I did some reconnaissance. I came to Maor, what we're going to talk about today. And that was really cool for me, and I'm glad I did it. So welcome in. Thank you for doing this.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate the opportunity to be here and share my story.
Okay, amazing. Why all the apprehension? What made you so nervous? No wrong answers.
I am not a person that likes a lot of attention.
Yeah.
I would say I'm generally very private. And this topic is obviously, very personal to me. And I do a better job in life of putting my head down and working and doing things than I do talking and sharing. But I think what's really important and why we're here is because this is a topic that should be talked about and is really important. And so I'm here overcoming my discomfort to talk about something that I think is valuable to share with everybody.
Yeah, I would agree. And I'm so glad that you said yes. I have a word of the year. Every year around New Year's, I pick a word and I live that word for the year. And it's interesting. This year, my word was override. So the things I typically do, I'm if I'd say, no, I don't like to go out, I'm not social, I override it. So you're in my override year.
I like that. And I think it's important in life too, just with all things, is that you don't do anything good in life when you're comfortable.
Yeah.
And so there is value in life in pushing yourself outside your comfort zone. And So here we are. Maor and this journey in general is pretty much all about pushing myself out of my comfort zone and, strengthening my emunah and my faith and all sorts of things. So here we are. I'm with you on your word.
Okay, that's amazing. So all right, your background is you're an attorney. Take us through how one goes from being an attorney to being running a special needs school.
So, good question. Very good question. I would say probably like yourself and so many other moms and amazing women, we are many things, right? We have many interests, we have many passions, we have many jobs. And I certainly am an attorney. I'm trained as an attorney. I worked very hard as an attorney. But I would say my story in many ways is one of just being a uncompromisingly dedicated mom who has just spent all of my time and determination making sure that my daughter Eva, who has special needs, is never left behind.
Right.
So that is really my story. And that is how I went from being an attorney and continue being an attorney, but also working as the director of Maor.
So are you still practicing as an attorney?
I am.
And what kind of law do you practice?
So I started doing business litigation. I worked at big firms, very, very big firms like Skadden and Winston and Strawn.
Okay, so I pronounced it wrong in our intro. Okay, continue.
How did you pronounce it?
Skadden?
It's Skadden Arps.
Oh
You should know this. You're a New York person.
I know, but God.
Skadden
okay,
is
well,
like-
sorry, I apologize.
Skadden is like the,
I was on the fence and I was going to ask you, but then I was like, I got to imagine it's Skadden. But okay, Skadden and Arps.
It's like, like all firms, Skadden, Arps, Slate, Meager, Flom, continue.
Of course.
I think what's valuable when you are an attorney is that you hone a lot of really important skills. And I think they serve you in pretty much anything you do. So I would say that being attorney, besides knowing how to work really hard, you learn how to think.
Yeah.
You learn how to think, you learn how to strategize. And I would say that I'm a very good problem solver. And I would say in many ways, that's probably what animates me.
Yeah.
And I would say that it helps you come up with creative solutions to very complex problems.
Yeah.
And so I would say this particular problem or this subset of issues of, neurodiversity and special needs and schools and things like that in California is a very complex area to navigate. So I would say that that's where my skill set and my background have put me in a position to be useful here.
And not all states are created equal in this way, right?
Very
There
true.
some states that are just overall better for families and/or if you, I gotta imagine that at a state level, there are some that perform better with support and some that do not.
Yeah, no, it's also a really excellent question and is something I encountered as well. In many ways, it becomes an issue of funding. And you will hear, or I heard many times on my journey, oh my gosh, you have a daughter with special needs, you should move to New York. That was almost like the first refrain I got very often, for purposes of the fact that there's supposedly great funding in New York, there's great school options, things like that. But in many ways, it can also be the grass is greener, right? Some people will say New York has amazing funding. And I know people who've actually moved to New York and then they come back and say, we didn't even realize the funding here was so good.
Right.
It's different. I would say that California has actually really excellent benefits, almost better than many, many other states for families. They are hard to get and they are hard to navigate.
Yeah.
So being able to figure out how to go through Medi-Cal or regional center or get something called in-home supportive services requires a lot of legwork, a lot of, endless phone calls for 8 hours a day talking to Medi-Cal. And most families and most people who have kids with special needs don't necessarily have the bandwidth for that. So being able to access those services can be a little bit of a burden. But once you do, we have really good benefits. Funding for schools is a real challenge here in California, and that has been in many ways.
What do you mean, like
challenge.
funding for schools?
So this gets into a very deep issue, and I don't want to lose your audience.
No,
before
I know,
we
and
start.
actually, well, my very last question talks a little bit about accessing resources, and maybe we don't jump ahead. But But I just want to ask, just surface, when you say the funding, meaning, what does that mean?
Okay, so very simply, there's what's called the IDA, and that is a federal law, and that is what gives students or kids with disabilities access to government funding to support services that they may need, like therapies, things like that. So then that comes down to a state level.
Okay.
And generally, traditionally, it was that you could access those funds, but only if you were in a non-religious setting. So for example, if you are in public school, then you have access to those fundings. There are old laws and codes on the books that say that if you are in a religious setting or if you're in a religious school, that you cannot actually access those services.
But why?
That is what the law used to be. But for somebody, again, this will be not interesting to anybody else, but to me, it's fascinating. There was a recent Supreme Court decision that actually changed that law. So
that's hugely important
it's
to everybody.
Hugely important.
Is that tied in a little bit to the whole concept of the school choice? Where is it that same umbrella?
It's similar. It's very similar. And basically it does impact, this is not just necessarily special needs kids. This is any student attending, religious school, Catholic, Jewish, all those things, and their access to funding. So, when you say, what are you involved with or how does your background work? So there is currently a lawsuit right now that I would say we are part of, or we're the impetus for, if you will, where we are in front of the Ninth Circuit right now.
Wow.
And we are challenging those laws in California. Yeah, it's really...
I just got goosebumps.
Like I said, this stuff is, if you talk to the nerdy lawyer that I am, the coolest part of all of this, to everyone else, they've already glazed over and we've lost them.
I don't think so. I think everybody can relate to this issue of you only get funding when you're in a public school.
Correct.
Whereas if you're in a private school, you're still paying taxes.
Correct.
You're still contributing to the overall pot, right? And yet, if your child has needs, you don't have access to it unless you're in a public school. You're penalized for that.
Exactly. Which is completely, not as law should be. And as the Supreme Court said, which is not the law. But if you go to the California Code and you look at, for example, what's called the non-public school code. So for people who are familiar with the help group or other institutions that are actually private institutions, but they receive state funding, there is a provision in the beginning of that code that says you have to be non-sectarian, which means non-religious.
Right.
And that is literally old, bad law. But like anything else in the world, if you were to go to the school district and you would say, hey, this doesn't apply anymore, nobody's going to say, great, let's change that. You have to go through the court system. So here we are.
Lucky for you. You're pretty familiar with that.
Lucky for us. So there is a case right now that is in front of, on appeal in front of the Ninth Circuit that is being handled by a firm called the Beckett Fund. And they are one of the, largest civil liberties, religious freedom nonprofit organizations, being backed by the OU and, involving a lot of people here in the community.
That's incredible. That's something I didn't even know about when we started.
So we are looking to change law. And if you talk to somebody like me who is an attorney, you think about when you try to figure out how you end up where you end up and what you're doing and the question of how did I go from being a lawyer to running a special needs school. I think back of when I was in law school, learning about constitutional law and these kinds of things. And, fascinating. You're reading all of these amazing cases that changed law. And to be here right now for so many kids, like you said, impacting so many people in our community, kids, and being able to be on the forefront of changing law, exciting stuff.
Sarah, that's a big deal.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Stuff.
That's a really big deal. Can you talk a little bit about what the journey is like from discovering that you have a child with special needs to kind of figuring out what the best journey is for them? What, how to give them the best advantage possible? I don't know how far back we want to go, but I don't know. You tell us however far back you want to go.
I can be brief.
Okay.
I've told this story a few times now, so I can be brief. But I do think it's important for people to understand, because I think unless you've lived it or you've been in it or you've had a family member, you don't realize how all-encompassing it is and how challenging. And I think that's important for people to know as well. So I will give you a brief synopsis of just sort of my personal journey. And again, everybody's journey is different, but in many ways, I think we share a lot of similar stories.
Yeah.
So I have 4 kids, and my youngest daughter, Eva, has special needs. I didn't know that when she was first born. She didn't have, any underlying genetic condition or anything like that. So she was just a typical kid to me. And I would say, after the first few months, we started noticing that she wasn't hitting those milestones and things like that. And to be honest, I really didn't know what to do. She's the youngest of 4 kids. And apparently my other kids, all were fine so far.
Right.
And I didn't really know what to do. So we started navigating, doctor's appointments and therapies and just entering that world of trying to figure out what was going on. I would say my kids were all very little at one time. I think I had 4 kids under 4.
Wow.
So it was very challenging and very difficult trying to kind of navigate what she needed and services and that whole world. I felt in many ways like I was finding my way in the dark, I guess is the best analogy I can give.
Yeah.
And
did you have anybody around you who kind of was going through something similar, or anybody that you could kind of lean on?
I felt so alone. I understood very clearly that I needed wisdom and support. And I would say that I reached out to the community to kind of see what services and things like that were available. It was, not much.
Yeah.
And I started to kind of realize very early on that I was going to have to be Eva's best advocate, right? It was going to be on me to get her the support that she needed. And I would say, thus began my journey as a mom with a special needs child. And then, and that's how we spent our first, few years, just really putting my head down, researching, reading, doctor's appointments, therapies, like going down the rabbit hole of just accessing these benefits and early intervention services. It was incredibly difficult. Luckily, very early on in my journey, I met another unbelievable mom, Chaya Khazana, and I would say never underestimate the power of connection, right?
Yeah.
And Chaya and myself connected with another mom, and we created a WhatsApp group called Questions and Sharing.
Okay.
And the point was to share ideas, share resources, find other moms in the community where we could say, hey, do you have this doctor? Do you know what to do? How do I get this service? And I would like to say that I'm very proud that there were 3 of us when that started, and that group still exists today and has, I think now, 140 moms on it.
Whoa.
Yeah. So we still...
All in like the greater LA area.
All like Jewish moms, open to anybody, who's the best doctor? How do I get these services? How do I find out, not reinventing the wheel, if you will. That was kind of my thought, and how my mind works when this whole process started was, where is everybody?
Yeah.
And why am I figuring this out on my own?
Yeah.
I clearly don't know what I'm doing. And somebody must have been here before.
Right.
I just can't find them.
Right.
But there should be somebody that I can go ask questions to, and that I can ask all these questions like, you should be applying for this, and this. Go to here for therapy. And it was like, where is that? Where is that resource?
I'm shocked that there wasn't that resource.
There were a lot of different organizations doing different things that are very helpful. But for that particular piece, it wasn't there for me.
Yeah. And then there's like the family unit, because there's probably a massive shakeup in the family. The other children are also dealing with a diagnosis along with parents. They don't have as much of the same language. I mean, it's probably so much family work, even just internal family work. Forget when you're even dealing with the outside stuff of trying to figure out.
Of course, it's like, though your other kids aren't getting the attention they need because you're focusing so much attention on trying to solve for this piece.
Right.
There's a lot of challenge between husbands and wives. You're not comfortable necessarily even going out to friends' houses, community pieces, because you're dealing with a child who maybe has medical challenges or who has other behavioral and other pieces, and you're maybe uncomfortable. When we started this journey, there was so much stigma, especially in our community, on this topic. So even finding people to talk to and being open about it was incredibly difficult. It was kind of like, a lot of people had this idea of, they maybe had a kid or they maybe had something, but they didn't share it with people.
Yeah.
Or it just wasn't a comfortable topic. So I am I'm an information person. I like to share. And so that was really hard for me too, because it was like, I know there are people out there, but I can't seem to find them, or I can't find people who are comfortable sharing with me. So I really do feel like I'm navigating alone.
Yeah. You quite literally were.
Quite literally.
What are, like, I mean, I know what the stigmas are, but I'm do you think that that's do you think that some of those stigmas and some of the, I don't know, sort of discomfort around talking about it is specific to the Jewish community, or do you think in general the whole special needs kind of topic across the board in your experience? Do you think it's like cultural for us, or do you think in general people just they don't want to go there?
I think, it's always been obviously a sensitive topic for so many people. I would say that over time it has gotten more comfortable, I would say, in general.
Yeah.
But I would say in the more Orthodox community, I would say that the stigma, I would say not generally, I would say like if you're in New York or other places, I think you can have a lot more open discussion and I think people are much more comfortable. I would say in LA, from my personal experience, I would say the stigma was greater.
Yeah. In people not wanting to acknowledge that their children had special needs and then in turn like be a support. Is that sort of what some of the...
So I think for so many people, just admitting it or talking about it, people were nervous for like shidduch for their other kids,
to say,
right?
It always comes down to like they're getting their kids married off.
Right. And by the way, these are all very real. There's no judgment of any kind. These are all real thoughts and fears. If you feel like if somehow somebody finds out I have a kid who has these challenges and this is going to impact, my other children succeeding in life or getting married, that's a very real thought. That's a really real fear. And so I think there was just this kind of sense of we just don't openly talk about it. I mean, I have met over the years so many people who had kids that were like off in the public school system and nobody even knows like who that kid is. That kid doesn't come to shul. That kid doesn't, engage in community things. We know that family has that son or daughter, but they're not really like they're not part of the family. They're not part of the community. And we just sort of don't, we have this kind of separate and apart, if you will.
Yeah. It seemed like you're just from the short amount that I met you, that was never going to be your story.
I would say that, that has been, I think, my underlying kind of motivation was that my daughter is, she's just like everybody else and she should be included like everybody else and she should have all the same opportunities in life, in education, as all my other kids because, by the way, I don't know what she's capable of. Nobody does. No, a doctor, myself, anybody, we all can make guesses and we can all see what we think. But at the end of the day, Hashem runs the world, not myself. And at the end of the day, I don't know what she's capable of, but all I know is my job is to give her every opportunity to become the best version of herself that she's going to become. And that is my job as her mom.
It seems like you went almost like polar opposite. Like you took a look at this landscape of, I didn't have the support. I didn't know who to turn to. I didn't feel I had a community. And so it seems like you went out to create that community that you didn't have.
I think in many ways that's true. I wouldn't give myself that much credit. I would say that, when I first started out on this journey, I really, I thought I can do this. Yeah. This is my personality. I know how to handle this. I would say I had really no idea what I was getting myself into. There's no doubt about that.
That's the only reason we embark on it.
100%. And I would say that it wasn't so easy. I was saying to you when we first started that my biggest feat after 12 years is that I can have a conversation with you here about my daughter Eva and not break down into tears.
Yeah.
I was saying at the beginning that, the conversation used to be, tell me about your daughter. And literally I would just completely break down in tears with all of the emotions. So like anything, you have those stages of grief. I certainly went through all of them. There were so many times that things were just incredibly hard and difficult. So it wasn't always this sunny advocate, I'm going to go, be amazing. There was a lot of challenge. There continues to be a lot of challenge. It is a journey.
Yeah. Because the woman sitting here today, you would not even know.
We're doing our best. Like we do at all times. Yeah. I show up, I like to say I show up every day and try to do my best. And some days are good, some days are hard, and we roll.
Did you have amazing parents? You seem like someone who had amazing parents.
I had very interesting parents.
Okay.
They are amazing. I had a very interesting childhood, and I am sure that in many ways set me up for being where I am today. So I for sure need to give credit.
Okay. But like a tight-knit family?
So my parents are very interesting. I come from a small family. I grew up in Orange County.
Okay.
So, that's another story for us. My parents, we were one of like 5 Jewish families in Orange County. At the time, there were very few Jews. And my parents are like save the world human beings.
Okay.
So my parents, everybody I come from is doctors. My dad is an eye surgeon. My mom is a nurse practitioner. My mom is also a lawyer. My mom has 20 careers. And my parents just did good in the world. That was very much a value of theirs. And when I was little, my dad would actually take me on trips. He was part of a group called Surgical Eye Expeditions, and they would go all over the world and basically like fix people's eyes in third world countries.
Like Doctors Without Borders,
Exactly.
but before Doctors Without
Exactly.
Borders.
And my mom is like a disaster medicine specialist. So when other kids in Orange County were doing I don't know what, I was like in eye clinics with my dad in the middle of nowhere in Mexico, like helping him do eye surgery.
Whoa.
So I definitely had an interesting childhood.
Yeah.
And, my dad used to joke, I would go on these trips with him and they would be literally in the middle of nowhere because my dad does, he's a pediatric eye surgeon. So when you go to third world countries, if you see kids who have strabismus or crossed eyes, it's a relatively simple surgery, but if you go to, Mexico, Africa, nobody has access to things like this, and you're actually quite stigmatized in society. So we would go with this group of doctors and whoever else. They would go to these clinics, and people would have heard they were coming, and it'd be like lines and lines for days and days. And my dad and them joked, I probably shouldn't share this, but the nurses there weren't nurses; they were just young girls.
Right.
And of course, my dad, the other surgeons, their Spanish was okay. Right. So I learned very on that I became the nurse, and I was like at such a young age, I can't even tell you, like holding the eyes open while they were doing surgeries because my dad and the other doctors were like, come over here. They're like, we can't translate. It's too hard.
Oh my God.
I definitely grew up with a perspective of, you work hard in life, but you do good. You go out and you help people, and you use what you have to do good in the world.
I'm going to get into all of this, the nitty gritties and more questions, the technical questions, but I just feel compelled to ask in this moment if there's anybody listening who maybe just is finding out.
Oh, yes.
Or just starting out the journey of figuring out what they can do with their child who is special needs or neurodivergent. What would you say to them?
I would say call our free social worker at Maor.
Okay. That's amazing.
I would say that one of the things we do, and we'll get into all that, but part of what we wanted to build was, a school. I will get to the school piece.
Yeah.
But also we wanted to be the address. We wanted to be the address for special needs children and families in LA so that nobody, had to find their way in the dark like we did.
Yeah.
And that, they would have access to all of the education and support and resources they would need. So we have a advocacy department, and we have a free social worker to anybody in the whole community that they can reach out to and say, I need help. And it might just be, I need emotional support. It might be, I need access to these services. How do I get them? It might be, I need to figure out the right school setting for my kid, or my kid is here. This is the best setting, but I need some help navigating services and support.
What if you're not in LA?
You can call her too. But I would say that, I think connection, like I said, I think connection.
Like find a support group.
Find a support group, and anything. It could be a Facebook group. It can be just another mom you meet. I would say in this day and age, there's probably somebody that has a cousin, a nephew, a brother, a sister. And as uncomfortable as it may be, and people need to take time. But I would say for people to reach out to that person if they're struggling and offer support. And for those people to, when they're comfortable, reach out for support, because it is a really hard journey between, doctors and therapies and research. It's a full-time job. It's legitimately a full-time job. And as much as we are all, many of us, A-type, I can figure this out, I can do it. I would say, don't try to do it on your own. Accept help. And, and just use all the resources at your disposal and connect with other moms, because, somebody is probably been through what you've been through, and if they can save you a little bit of time and energy and resources so that instead of calling 52 doctors to find out who is covered by your plan and then trying to visit all of them and see who's good, if you can ask a mom, who's covered by Blue Cross and who's good, and you get a list of 5 instead of 25, that's already
huge.
Made your life a little bit easier.
Yeah. Tell us a little bit about Maor. Tell us about the school.
So, this is where the journey kind of continues with myself and Chaya. I would say that when our kids, we were navigating as best we could, kind of piecemealing, services and support. And I think we realized it was not a long-term plan. And our kids hit school age. So the way it works is that when your kids are under 3, they get what's called like early intervention services. So that may be just some therapy, some things like that. And once your kids get to age 3, they enter the school system.
Right.
We can talk about our topic of school system and education.
Yes.
And that's where things get harder. So when my daughter got to school age, I continued doing my diligence, and I looked for the Jewish school that would accept my daughter. And there was none.
Oh, wow.
And this is LA, and it is the second largest Jewish population in the entire country. And again, I'll say it, there was none. And
they flat out said no, no admittance.
There was
nowhere that could support, maybe.
Correct. And I was as surprised as you were to hear that. I was as surprised to learn that.
It shocks me.
It's shocking.
We're a huge community.
And
also we're a community with
resources.
Plenty of also like neurodivergent children. Like we have this is not a new
thing. So that was my first reaction.
What were people doing with their special needs children before?
Public school.
Ah.
Yes.
Right.
So,
but then you don't have the option to put your child in a school that aligns with like your faith.
Correct. And also, these are kids who in many ways, right, they're already separate. They're already different. They're already, kind of on a different path than your other kids. And so that further isolates them, right? They're not in Jewish school with your kids. They're not learning those same values. They're not coming home learning about the holidays. They're not able to participate. They're not even on the same school calendar.
Wow.
And that is in and of itself really a challenge for families. You're sort of, again, living this dual life. And, we've talked about, or we talked about this before, but, for people who live their life according to a certain set of values, and that those values are essential to your family and upbringing, to put your child in a setting where those values are not only not being honored, but they're probably being flipped.
Yep.
And you have a kid who maybe doesn't even understand all of that. And you know what kids are learning nowadays in school and what they're pushing.
Yep.
And so you're saying, okay, my kid is here because perhaps they're getting the supports, the supports and services they need, but I'm fighting another battle because how do I engage them in the community? How do I include them in family and holidays? And how do I undo the fact that my kid is coming home with a Christmas card and it's Hanukkah and my other kids are celebrating Hanukkah, and this kid not only doesn't know the songs and doesn't know what to do and doesn't know anything else, but they're coming home learning about something else.
Right.
Right.
So that's a lot. That's a lot to deal with on top of all the other things.
That's a lot. So that was it. So school age, so
it sort of always comes to a head for every family when school starts.
I think so.
You can kind of, because I guess when your children are young, small children are home anyway. You can always sort of
right, and you're still, and you're navigating, and your preschool is kind of a different thing.
Right.
So Chai and I had our kids at school age. So that was probably around 2017, and my daughter was 5. And we, I don't know, what do 2 determined, uncompromising mothers with special needs kids do when they are faced with these kind of situations? We create our own school.
This is the Jewish way.
This is the Jewish way. What's the Margaret Thatcher quote? They say, if you need something said, ask a man. If you need something done, ask a woman.
God,
who's more determined than a mom with a special needs kid who is fighting the battles and making sure her kid gets what she needs? You say you don't have one. I say, okay, let's make one.
That could not have been easy to create a school.
No.
Something tells me.
So we were, it started. We had my daughter and Chaya's son, and we started with our 2 kids at a class in the Friendship Circle which is an amazing organization, by the way.
Yeah, I was going to mention that too.
Amazing organization. So we started there. And by the way, they work with all the kids in public school. So they provide after school and all sorts of amazing activities for kids. They're an incredible organization. Love them.
Yeah.
Everybody should reach out to them also if they need support.
That's actually a great resource.
Yeah, the Friendship Circle is amazing. And they've been doing this for 30 years and are wonderful. They don't have a school, but they work with, they have after school programming and all sorts of other, mom support, dad support. Yeah. It's amazing. Volunteers.
And they also have the volunteer, which I know you Maor has also now.
Correct.
The volunteer opportunity.
Yeah,
I want Lila to get involved with.
Yeah.
So today, talk about today, like Maor. What?
So we had 2 kids.
Right.
And that was 2017. And it was amazing. And we just started. We knew the challenges. We're very good. Again, you will sense the lawyer background. We did our diligence. We visited schools here. We talked to community members. Chaya actually went to New York.
Does Chaya have what's her background? Or
her background's in education,
okay.
And she's just an amazing mom,
right?
Also.
Yeah.
And uncompromising and determined. And we went to New York. We visited a lot of different programs and schools. I think I would say that from my journey and her journey, I think we had the idea or the wisdom to know what was missing and what was needed. I actually listened to your podcast last week. It was really, really good. And I think what he said was, I became the rabbi that I had wished I had had. So I think that was in many ways, we created the organization and the supports that we wished we would have had.
Yeah.
So that other people would have an easier journey.
Yeah.
And we grew to support the community. And we basically, today have almost 40 students.
Wow.
Probably 50 next year.
Wow.
Which is an amazing thing in and of itself. And we have a bunch of different programs. We have an inclusive preschool. So for kids, as young as 18 months, 2 years old, because those kids are actually getting kicked out of school as well. We can go into that discussion.
What do you mean?
I think the challenge is, hold on, I'll finish what we have and then we'll go into that because I think that's a really important topic and I don't want to give it a side note.
This is why you're the lawyer.
This is why we're here. No, I would say, so we have an inclusive preschool.
Yeah.
Which is really important. And we have a school age program, a couple school age programs for kids that are about 5 to 18.
Okay.
Because we are the only place. We serve kids of all different levels. We have kids who have diagnoses. We have kids who have more what's called hidden disabilities like ADHD, ADD, dyslexia, things like that. And then we have our free advocacy services, which I think is just an incredibly important part of what we do, which is the social worker to support families. And we also do monthly advocacy series. So we do things to teach people how to access their services and benefits and how to get them. We do a free Mommy and Me in the community. And then we also do training and development in the existing schools. So if your child is in another Jewish school, and that is the right setting for them, which it most likely is,
right,
but they maybe don't have all the supports that they need, we'll go in and we'll train the teachers or we'll help kind of adjust or adapt the classroom setting to better support them.
Wow. Talk a little bit about, this whole topic gets me so upset.
I know.
But the stigma around any child who's not, I would say, performing on an average level, and I put air quotes for if you're listening and not watching, because there is really, that word is so, who is it? Every single person has, even now, I look at myself and I look at the way that I learn, the way that I retain information, the way that I like to absorb information. If I would not be a successful student now, today, if you put me in school right now, sure, I could not succeed. I probably would be thrown out. I move around a lot. I can't sit still, kind of like you. I do a lot of things at one time. Mm-hmm. So the fact that I'm hearing that 18-month-old, 2-year-olds are not able to participate is telling me that they're making these decisions or calls too early. Who's to say? It takes so long, even right now with my daughter who's 11, developmentally with math stuff. She's having some trouble around math. I mean, I have to imagine that all brains develop at different times in different
100%.
ways. So who gets to decide that that child should not be in the classroom?
So this is the topic on which you got me out of my shell.
This is how I got you riled
This
up.
is how we got out of my shell, because I think this topic is so important for everybody to hear. And I think I would start even like really from the basic point of what my thought is, having been on this journey, is that I think people very often have a narrow idea or a narrow frame of reference of what special needs means, right? I think people hear special needs and they just, they put it in their own framework.
Right.
But I think that there are so many neurodiverse kids who think and learn differently and who struggle in traditional school settings. And I think that's what's really important to talk about right now. And that thinking and learning differently, rather than being a deficit, can actually be your superpower, right? And it can be actually what propels you to do great things. You can become great by thinking and learning differently.
Yeah.
Can lead to greatness. Elon Musk, we could go down the list of all these individuals who are considered to be neurodiverse in the world. And I think that's what we really try to do at Maor. And what I think is really important to me is helping these kids realize that, giving them a new story of what they're capable of and giving them a new picture of what they can achieve and accomplish in life is so important. Because I think, I guess to answer your question of how do the schools decide and things like that, it's a complicated issue.
Right.
It's a complicated issue.
Because they have to
not
educate
simple.
the masses.
100%. But, traditionally, education is sort of a one size fits all, right? I mean, we're educating to a certain way because we have 20 to 30 kids in a classroom. But I think what happens is that, as you mentioned, probably post-COVID and in today's world, I mean, in many ways, we're all neurodiverse, right? I'd probably throw myself in there at this point too, right? We all think and learn differently. And I think even talking to people and making it clear, like, what does neurodiversity even mean, right? Let's even go back.
That's a great question. I think that's one of my questions. But I haven't been able to pick up my stack yet.
No,
we're rolling through. We're rolling through.
What does that even mean, right?
Right.
What does neurodiversity, what does that mean? And I think it's really an idea that people have different experiences and different interactions in the world, and that there's no right or wrong way to think and learn and behave. And thinking or doing things differently is not a deficit.
Right.
And so having that kind of viewpoint is really important because, putting kids in that situation. So in traditional school settings, I think what happens often is that if you have a kid who, doesn't fit in the box, because, and who does at this point, I think that a lot of times, schools don't have the manpower. Teachers don't have the training.
Right.
You have large groups of, you have just very large numbers of kids in the classrooms. And it is those kids who maybe learn and think a little differently or have behavioral or other challenges or can't sit still or whatever diagnoses or lack of diagnoses they have. And those are the kids that sort of fall behind or fall through the cracks because the teacher can't personalize for them.
Right.
They can't change the whole lesson for them. They don't have that. They don't have that ability. And so what happens, and this is kind of the conversation we had, is that, it sort of falls to the parent then, right? So you're putting your child in school all day. They're in school. They're getting all the benefits of school, the social interaction, the learning, But then it falls on you as the parent to sort of supplement that, if you will.
Yes.
And that can look like so many things. That can look like therapy, that can look like a shadow, that can look at like ed therapy. There's so many ways. But then instead of, necessarily partnering with the school or the school helping you, it's kind of like your job, right? Yeah. We have your kid here, we're doing our job, but now it's your job to kind of take care of all of these other pieces so that your kid can succeed and be here and not be trouble.
Right.
My air quotes.
Right.
But then what happens is for a lot of those kids, even when you're maneuvering that whole setup, which is costly, exhausting, all sorts of things, your kid is still not necessarily getting what they need and they're not necessarily thriving. And I think sometimes kids end up getting kicked out of school.
Yep.
Or they get moved from school to school to school.
Yep.
Or the question comes up like medication. We can get into that
about to
topic.
say.
And then not only that, and all those challenges that those present, but your kid also gets this idea that they're the difficult kid.
Yep.
They're the problem kid. They're not smart. And that in many ways becomes their identity.
Yep.
And you are setting that kid up for failure. And that's a kid who, again, probably will be going out there and doing great things if somebody actually believes in them and tells them that what is being told to them is their deficit and their challenge is really, their asset.
Yeah. Well, I was one of those troubled kids. It was back in the 80s, so they didn't have all the same,
names, right.
Not everybody, they weren't like forcing everyone to be medicated back then. So I narrowly escaped that. But I was very early on labeled like troublemaker, and I couldn't sit still, and I was always in the principal's office. So I know very much the experience of that child. And I'm now kind of going through that a little bit with my daughter.
Right.
And it's so painful, as you know, because I just don't want that. I'm not okay with that being her story.
100%. And we all know you live up to whatever story is created for you.
Yeah.
And even if you create, even at home, you're creating a great story and you're giving her all that she needs, that she's amazing, she's great. But if she's spending 8 hours a day at school and they're telling her otherwise, or she's getting the messaging otherwise,
right,
it will, it goes in.
Right. So you set out to fix all that, at least in the way that you could.
I definitely did not set out to be a trailblazer or to fix things. I most certainly ask anybody. I'm very happy to live under my rock. I set out, like I said at the beginning, I set out to make sure my daughter would never be left behind and other people wouldn't have to kind of go through what I did. And I think this is important. And I think timing matters. And I think it's just a topic that impacts everybody. And, and so, that is what that is why we created Maor 100%. We created it. We created a school and a place that thinks differently. We definitely don't put limitations on any of the kids we have. We want these kids to reach their highest potential.
Yeah.
We don't know what that is.
Right.
You don't know what that is.
Right.
I don't know what that is. But we're going to set them up for success. We're going to personalize education for them and teach them in a way that they learn best. And we're going to create kind of a holistic model so the kids are getting their academics, they're getting Judaic studies, so they, are part of our community, and they're also getting life and social skills where they need it, and they're getting other, enrichment activities. So they're getting, everything they need to succeed and thrive.
So I have two questions. One is, what is the criteria for attending Maor? Like, is it pretty much everybody? I mean, can anybody attend?
I mean, we are open to everybody.
Right.
We are open to the whole community.
Right.
It may be the right setting for some kids.
Right.
It may not.
Right.
And, we have, so for example, when we were talking about the preschool. So we actually just opened the preschool last year.
Okay.
For just this kind of reason we're talking about, I would say that I probably get 4 to 5 phone calls a day.
Wow.
Of kids getting kicked out of preschool. I know. It's really hard to hear that.
It's really hard to hear.
It's really hard to hear that. And some of these kids might end up with diagnoses.
Right.
Some maybe autism, maybe ADHD, maybe nothing. I don't know. Some kids, like we said, develop, again, we have COVID.
Yeah.
So a lot of kids have a lot of challenges and delays just from that.
Yep.
And also other kids just develop at different times and schedules.
Right. I got to imagine.
And so I think what happens is, again, small, too many kids in a class, teachers that don't have enough training, and and the schools are trying. Like they have a lot of the schools have really, I am not in a position here. I have nothing but good things to say. My kids all went through the Jewish school system. I have great experience.
I agree. I think they're doing a great job.
They're doing their best. A lot of schools have like really intense, student support departments. They have special ed people. They have behaviorists. They have therapists. They're really doing their part in many ways.
Yeah.
But, a kid will not be thriving and maybe they bring in a shadow to try to help it. And then the school's like, it's just not a right fit. So what we do is, like, for example, in the preschool, we have kids who ultimately we want as many kids as possible to be in the most inclusive school settings. They call it, we call it the least restrictive environment. You want every kid to be as included as possible. So we have kids who come to the preschool who need maybe that extra early support and that early intervention, but the goal being to mainstream them back.
Okay.
And so we have kids who come in, we have some kids who come in the preschool, and then they will be mainstreamed back.
So that was one of my other
Hopefully
questions.
successfully.
Is the goal to, when and if possible, is the goal always best case scenario to put the children back in
Of course.
Right. Okay.
Of course. Always. They should, we want everybody to be in the most inclusive environment. That's best for everybody.
Right.
And for some kids that'll be the path, and some kids it won't be. Some kids, just having that smaller, more personalized environment is going to be a better fit for them, or is going to be what the family thinks is the better fit. I look back at my older kids and I think, I think a lot of them probably would have done really well having a more a smaller, more personalized experience, right? They probably would have also.
Yeah.
And so, Maor might be the right setting, might be the right setting for a time. We have just, it's so personal for every family.
Yeah.
But that's why we really work hard to work with the existing schools too, and to do trainings and to provide support so that everybody is really working together to make sure that kids are getting all of the access to the resources and support they need. So families know that, there may be services they don't even know about that they could be accessing, and we want to open that door and say, hey, let us teach you how to get it.
Where do you think the greatest area of improvement could be made in just the mainstream school system in overall with supporting, forget even special needs, just children who think differently? Where is the where's the greatest pitfall coming? I just feel like it seems to be more prevalent than ever.
Yeah.
It feels like I'm hearing about more and more and more children needing to go on medication, specifically for ADHD. Where are we failing these kids?
That's a complicated question too. I think there's many aspects of that. I think openness and discussion and, working collaboratively together is the most important thing. For example, we just hosted last night for one of the schools in the community. We hosted an information session. And it was just open to everybody at the school. And we brought in a special ed attorney. I think we brought in somebody who is a therapist. We brought in a social worker. We had 5 or 6 people from the community just come and just have a panel.
Wow.
For just any parent to just kind of hear and listen and, just have an understanding of maybe some of the challenges, and that, there are ways for them to address it and to access it. And that was so beautiful because, we sort of brought the resources, but the school hosted us. They suggested to their families to come and to be open to that. And I think that kind of collaborative approach of everybody really working together to provide, families with those support and resources they need, and people talking and communicating, so you don't feel like so you're not made to feel like this is sort of a me problem.
Yeah.
And I'm supposed to be handling it on my own, and I am not an expert here, right? Why am I being the one needing to solve this? I'm a mom, but I'm not an educational expert here.
Right.
So I don't necessarily feel equipped to be doing that. But if we're working together and we're figuring these things out and accessing, support and resources the kids need, either that the school has or that, we can find a way to bring in, I think that is, that's the start.
I think that's a good, so what I'm hearing you say is that some of the pitfalls are that
I try to talk in positive language.
Yes, no, I love that. That's my job here on this podcast. I'm the bad cop, and my guests are very often the good cop. I'm like, why is everybody anxious? No, I think you're right, because I think that's a great place to start, because I know that whenever for me in my experiences, is whenever there was any sort of hey, it looks like, your daughter needs support here, or this is not up to par, I felt like I was on my own. I felt like I have to figure this out. I have to find tutors. I have to hire tutors. I have to find the right people. I have to quickly, and I felt really alone.
For sure.
And I do think that the schools saying like, let's together, this is not on you and it's not only on us. It's on both. It's on all of us.
For sure.
That's
like we're like we're like a team. We're a collaborative team. We're going to be, you know, your daughter or my daughter's like team, and we're going to kind of figure this out together and try things.
Does the whole grade system sort of go out the window? What are the markers? How do you grade and or deal with like kind of moving to the next grade or the next year? Like how do you guys navigate that?
So, you know, we group kids differently. The kids obviously, you know, they're in a grade, they're tested, they do standardized testing, things like that. But we speaking of that kind of collaborative model, that's really how we operate at Maor. Also, you know, everybody kind of has team meetings for each kid, and you know, we're working on whatever level they're at. So we might, in a classroom, they might be doing like a group lesson on math or science or something like that, and then they'll break it down, you know, for each kid and the level they're at.
Okay.
And then they'll be working on that. And we're constantly doing, you know, testing, and we're meeting with families, and we're meeting with the therapist, you know, to kind of see how the kids are progressing and to be, you know, moving them along.
Right. I love that. What kind of other programs do you do as far as outside of like your bog standard, you know, reading, writing, math? Because when I was there was like singing and music.
Yeah. You know, I think what's really important too, this is, you know, if I boil all things down to one very simple principle, I've got a few of them. You know, I think what's really important for all of these kids is to be in a warm, loving Jewish environment. I think that these are very special neshama. These are very kids that are very thoughtful and sensitive. And I think that when they're in a warm, loving, you know, supportive environment, they feel that, and that helps them learn and thrive. So we really try to, you know, we try to make the day engaging. We have a lot of movement, as we've talked about, this concept of, I think that's the other challenge too, especially in like a Jewish day school. The day's really long.
So long.
It's so long. My son right now, my son's in high school. My son's day is 8 to 5.
Yeah.
With, you know, some physical activity, but not enough. That's a long time. That's a long time.
I drop Lyle off at 7:45 in the morning.
It's a long day.
Today we're getting home after 7:30.
It's a long day. It's a really long day. I mean, I don't know about
11.
you. I can't concentrate though.
No, I can't concentrate for 2 hours.
Yeah, I have the same issues. So we have a lot of movement. We have like this amazing sensory gym.
Yeah.
Right. So we've got a playground. We've got this incredible sensory gym for the kids to get a lot of proprioceptive support. So there's like a rock climbing wall, a foam pit, there's swings. Yeah. Because for a lot of these kiddos, like movement is the way they learn, right? Like they don't actually do so well. We have one of the middle school boys, and he's very funny. He also literally can't sit still. I find him on top of the monkey bars, like studying, literally reading a book, sitting on top of the monkey bars. And he'll say, you know, he's like, I can't sit still. I said, it's not that you can't sit still. It's that your brain works really fast, and you've already figured out the lesson. You've learned it in like 2 seconds, and then you're done. And you actually don't need to sit longer and kind of think about it. You've got to move because your mind is already moving somewhere else.
Yeah.
So we do a lot of music, a lot of kids. My daughter literally learns through music. That is her language, like 1,000%. So I literally don't have the greatest voice, although I will say that my house has music on all the time. My husband lives through music, but anything we can turn into a song, or anything that, you know, they say that, you know, the part of your brain that you learn music in is, you know, different than speech. So for example, I'm sure you've heard like somebody who has like a stroke patient or somebody like that who maybe can't speak but can still sing.
Yep.
So I would say like for my daughter, that part of her brain is super on fire. So, you know, bringing it back to the personal, like we just had her bat mitzvah, and I like to say I did it Maor style. And we were talking about, you know, I've had all my other kids had back-to-back-to-back bar and bat mitzvahs, and I was trying to...
Because you had 4 in a row.
And because my oldest 2 were twins, so like my son was 13, and then my daughter was 12, and then my son was 13, then my next daughter was 12, so it was like...
Oh, wow.
And I was kind of thinking, like, what is this going to look like for my daughter? It's going to look a little bit different. And it was really, really amazing. So I sat with her Judaic studies teacher and I said, let's get creative. Let's get thoughtful. What are we going to do? And I said, you work with her every day. Like, why am I going to tell you what to do?
Yeah.
Let's collaborate. Let's let you people do what you do best.
Yeah.
And she was so great. And then, when I love empowering people to do what they do really well, because you let them go and like, they just, they wow you. So she sat with my daughter and she came to me and she's like, I think I want to work on a song with Eva. And I was like, love it. And she's like, let's teach Eva about what it means to be a bat mitzvah. And let's my daughter's into Taylor Swift, same thing all 12-year-old girls are into. So, let's create a song. Let's teach her about the brachot. Let's teach her what, she needs to learn about. And instead of just kind of traditionally, let's make it into a song. She was so cute. She came to me. She was like, I think it's good, but I'm not really. And I'm like, we have no expectation here. Like, this is the bat mitzvah. You working with her and you learning with her in this way is her learning about it. Yeah. Whatever that ends up in and whatever we do, I have nothing. Just go. You do you, and you're doing amazing. Yeah. They wrote this amazing song, and my daughter was so into it. And then there's a woman, Joelle, who works with my daughter, because my daughter also now has type 1 diabetes. So on top of special needs, during COVID, we got type 1 diabetes because Hashem absolutely loves me.
Right.
You
were such a powerhouse.
Do you ever listen to, I listen to a few things on social media. Charlene Amanoff, she's like this amazing speaker who one of the best speakers I've ever heard in my whole life. And she has this line where she's like, Hashem is obsessed with me. Literally. She's like, he is obsessed with me. And I won't go that far. I'm not on that level. But I was like, Hashem loves me. Loves me a lot. So
seems like he thinks you're pretty capable.
Whatever. We disagree at times. Sometimes Hashem and I talk and I say, Hashem, I really appreciate that you think I'm on that level or that I can do that. I'm like, I tend to disugree with your assessment, but
But we're going with it.
So
what's entailed with the diabetes? Like I guess a lot of blood sugar monitoring.
Diabetes is hard.
Yeah.
Because so that's like another piece to special needs. So, speaking of this concept of what does special needs mean, special needs can be just, neurological, other diagnoses. It can also be medical pieces. Right. So, you can have one, you can have both, you can have the whole spectrum. So, we added that. We've had medical pieces, but we added that medical piece during COVID. Unfortunately, I think that there were a lot of actually kids, adults, people with special needs that were, in many ways like immunocompromised. Yes. And COVID led to diabetes, lupus, all sorts of things for a lot of these kiddos and people.
Getting COVID?
I think kids got COVID.
Right.
And then, because their systems were somewhat immunocompromised, then diabetes can be caused by a virus. Right. So, if your body is compromised and you get a virus, you can end up with something else. Right. So, we added that to the mix. It's diabetes is incredibly challenging, and diabetes plus special needs is like, wow. So, anyways, I never had help, but I was mentioning Joelle in the context of the bat mitzvah. Sorry, I do finish thoughts.
No, I'm there with you. I forgot even where we started. So thank God you're paying attention.
Joe, I got help this year because I was sort of navigating all things plus diabetes was really hard, and sort of having one human on earth that was responsible for my daughter's medical needs seemed like not a safe idea. Yeah. My 12-year-old daughter was the one who was giving insulin shots to my daughter sometimes because nobody else could do it. And I felt like that probably was not a good idea. So Joelle, who works with my daughter now and is amazing, sings. Like, she's an incredible singer. Wow. Like, she's a legitimate.
Well, that was Freudian.
So she recorded the song they worked on for her bat mitzvah, and then they would sing it together. So Eva would sing it in the car when we got home on her guitar. And then at her bat mitzvah, we played a little video of her singing the song.
That's so sweet.
But it was like the bat mitzvah Maor style, figuring out how Eva learns best. And figuring out, what motivates her and what interests her, and then, going with that.
Incorporating that. 2 final questions. One is and I know this is probably obvious, but you might have some insight, what is the role of the parents in advocating for their children? Or how does that show up? Because I think a lot of parents, whether your children have special needs or not, you're going to be confronted, and we will be confronted in our life with a school system or teachers, whatever, that tell you something about your child. And then it's like we have to sort of hear what they're saying, but also like advocate for our kids. And I guess it looks different, I'm sure, especially if you're dealing with a special need. But like, can you speak a little bit about just like advocating for your kids and what that sort of looks like, maybe even just for you, or any tips?
I think that's such a good question. And I think, I always go back to wisdom, right? I think as you get older, you get, a little bit more wisdom. I think when you're a young parent and your kids are first in school, you don't have a lot of it. And, when educators or teachers tell you things, you believe them because you think, this isn't my background. They must know. If they're telling me this, they must know. If they say my kid should be on medication, or if they say my kid is behind, they're telling me because that's their assessment. And I think when you're just starting out, you are very inclined to take all of that to heart. And I think the most important thing, just as a parent with a child who maybe has some needs, is that you will always be your kid's best advocate. There will never be anybody who will be more determined and who will be more passionate about making sure their kid gets what they need and succeeds than the parent.
Yep.
But also you have that intuition.
Yeah.
You will always have an intuition. You will always know your kid best, and you always need to trust that intuition because you are probably always right. So to be able to kind of, I think, have a balance of, taking those suggestions, exploring them because they may be right. One of my other daughters needed some reading support early on. And one of the teachers pulled me aside early on and she was like, hey, I'm going to tell you right now, your kid is like behind in reading and they might kind of push her along, but you should do something about it. And like, she kind of called me out on it and she was right. She really was. And she was a little bit gutsy doing it. And she was right though. I listened to her and I was really glad I did because a lot of times they do have really good insight and suggestion. But I think that if you have that, I like to call it your spidey sense.
Yeah.
If you have that like sense of like, them saying your daughter should be on medication or things like that, that feel maybe they don't, dissonant, they don't resonate with you, that you shouldn't ignore your own intuition. And that may look like, getting another opinion or, maybe taking advice but not following it if it doesn't feel like the right thing to do.
Yeah. I love that. And final question. For anybody listening, they may not have their own personal interaction with a special needs child. They may not have a special needs child, but how can all of us be better community members and helpers and supporters of a family struggling or living with some, any sort of diagnosis with a child? Like, how can we be better? Like, what are things? What can I do?
That's a good question. I really like that question. It's very thoughtful. I think something that's really important is normalizing, right? So Kaya, who I've mentioned numerous times, she grew up in Australia. And what she told me always, she said, we only had one Jewish school in Australia, right? So everybody was there. She's like, we had kids with Down syndrome. We had kids, it was just everybody was there. So because we grew up with everybody and around everybody, everything was so normal. Kids don't recognize differences.
Yeah.
Right? Like if you come to our preschool, the kids have no idea who's different, who's not. They think they're all exactly the same. Right. And so I think when kids are exposed to things and the community, kids in the community are exposed to kids who are different and people that are different early on, it just becomes part of your worldview that everybody's different. Everybody, that concept we said of what is neurodiversity, it's that idea that there are, my Moroccan father-in-law says something all the time. It takes many different people to make a world, right? We need everybody. We need everybody in the way they think and learn differently to, be a successful society, right? We need to be inclusive of everyone. And I think that the younger you are exposed to that and that becomes your normal, then that is your worldview. And I think that, I think exposing kids, whether they're volunteering at Maor, Friendship Circle, wherever else, and just having that exposure is the best way to kind of start.
Yeah.
And then I think also, just being supportive. I think for so many families who have kids who struggle, even going out to an event or shul or some kind of activity is such a stressor you'd have no idea. They're like, oh my God, my kid might be overstimulated, right? My kid might have some kind of behavior and it like embarrass myself or my other kids. And like, they're so filled with, whatever, that maybe they don't come. Maybe they come, but they like sit in the corner or they're, off. And I think just, being aware, being aware of all those things. And I think just, making friends and families, not feel so alone. Or if you have a friend or mom who has like a tough time of it, like, we're going to go out to dinner tonight.
Yeah.
Right? We're going to give you a break. I know you can't take a break, but maybe my daughter's going to come babysit tonight.
Yeah.
Because you need to get out a little bit and, be a human for a little bit. So I think, just all things that are in that realm of sensitivity and just being aware and involving, everybody in different aspects of the community is important.
I love that. Thank you for saying yes, even though you didn't want to.
And talking a lot.
I needed you to talk a lot. That's sort of how this works. But no, I think it's so special. The work that you're doing is so special. The work that Maor is doing is so special. I know it takes a village, but the village somebody had to start it, right? Someone has to shake up the status quo, and it might have been a team, but you were definitely a ringleader. So I'm in awe of you and the work you do, and I was so excited to come learn more about Maor. I hope my audience does too, and I'm so appreciative that we did this today. So thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate it. When you say it takes a village resonates with me, my life definitely takes a village, and Maor I like to say, Hashem put me there, right? Like, I didn't really have a choice. I'm here, but the people that are there working every day, the teachers, the staff, the administrators, these are angels on earth. These are like the greatest human beings out there. And, if anybody is interested in kind of learning more, or my other thing that's really important, sorry, I'm going to switch back to, is, getting more people in our community involved in special ed, right? Like, becoming therapists, teachers, things like that. I would love to have more people from our community to access, to bring in. So just,
Fabulous. Thank you.
Thank you.